What's up, you Kooks? And welcome back to my mountain biking podcast. I decided to call this Kooks Only, so hence the welcome here. But first thing off, I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you actually hang out and watch here for a little bit. If you're on YouTube, this is structured like a podcast, so you don't need to sit and watch the video the whole time. You are welcome to if you want to. But feel free to minimize and just listen along. First thing I want to get to today, question of the day, kind of something that's been on my mind, something I'm thinking about potentially for videos, things like that. But this right now is pretty simple. It's just what are your favorite or what do you think are or is the best mountain biking destination? I'm in the U.S., so you can keep it in the U.S., or if you think somewhere else globally, feel free to plug that in there. Obviously, there's Whistler that's not in the U.S., but popular, unpopular, hidden gems, whatever comes to mind for you, whatever you think is the best. It does not have to be somewhere you have gone, maybe somewhere you want to go, but I'm just curious about that discussion. So again, if this is on YouTube where you're watching, drop a comment below with where you would like to go, where you have gone already and you love, or someplace you've heard is pretty awesome. I want to hear them. Let me know. All right, the first thing we're going to get into, and I'm going to jump over onto the computer to read off some of the specs and things. But the first thing we're going to get into is the new Walmart bike that just launched. It's been over on YouTube, or talked about on YouTube quite a bit, but mainly by two YouTubers, Kev Central and then Maddie Active. All right, so we're gonna pop on over here. Gonna check out some of the details on this Ozark Trail. So Walmart bike. For those of you who aren't familiar, who maybe weren't getting into mountain biking in the last 4 or 5 years or so, were already in the sport and you weren't paying attention to Walmart bikes because you probably didn't have any reason to. You might not be familiar with it, but Walmart has been introducing mountain bikes. I would say for the past 5 years, they've been kind of jumping into the more real mountain bike scene as opposed to the bikes that say they're mountain bikes but have stickers all over them that say you shouldn't actually ride them on trails or off any paved. Essentially, they say, hey, ride on gravel but not anywhere else. But I'd say there was a lot of buzz around the Schwinn Axum about 4 years ago. And then there was another Nishiki, Colorado comp that made the rounds. It was sold at Dick's Sporting Goods. But Walmart has been edging their way into this budget mountain bike category. And this, I would say this newest venture here seems to show that they're actually listening to the type of feedback that they're getting from mountain bikers, like actual mountain bikers, and they're trying to incorporate those things while still keeping the cost low. So I've talked about budget mountain bikes a fair amount, and what you often run into when you're lowering the budget lower and lower and lower is eventually around like the $900 threshold, you lose a few things, and you seem to always lose the air fork on any hardtails, and then you also lose through axles, and you end up getting quick release, and then you lose additionally the dropper post. So on this bike you do lose some of those things, but you have through axles, so it is definitely more easily upgradable as a platform. And then I would say notable, it also does not have a dropper post, it does not have an air fork, but let's get into the actual specs and the geometry on this one. So it does come with, as mentioned, a coil fork. It's a SR Suntour XCM 100 millimeter fork. Mechanical disc brakes, obviously you'd probably want to upgrade those fairly quickly. Does have through axles, and then the shifter drivetrain combination is a micro shift Acolyte, I believe. I have used this shifter before, or this drivetrain, and it works pretty well. I had pretty crisp shifting. The clutch on the derailleur is not bad, and then I can't remember if this is a 12 speed, but it's a 1x with a wide chain ring up front. So you should not have too many issues with dropping the chain. I've seen on videos it's not the most quiet bike, but that's probably not the drivetrain. It looks to be the internal cable routing on it, which again, in my opinion, I would do all external cable routing. Just make this an absolutely like upgrade platform type bike, because then you can replace the fork, you can replace the shock, you can add a dropper post, but you could replace the fork without having to replace the wheels. And then you could also actually, if you wanted to, upgrade the wheels and not have to. Basically, you could upgrade the rear wheel because you have a through axle already, and you wouldn't be stuck with what's on there. Especially, oftentimes you want to upgrade the rear wheel because you're like blowing out the cheap wheel or cheap wheel setup that's on there. But let's jump into the geometry real quick, because that's also another thing I really am frustrated with when I look at budget bikes from real mountain bike companies, or some of the bigger companies, is that you will often see the geometry switch from being a trail focus or kind of trail bike to, once you get under $1,100, a bunch of them shifting to be very strictly cross-country geometries. So your head tube angle is always like 68, 69, and maybe sometimes 67, but just not a good setup if you're looking for a entry bike into the trail bike category, but you want to buy a hardtail and you only have $1,000. So they're kind of typecasting often people into a specific category instead of offering multiple options in a price point for multiple different categories, if that makes sense. But let's look at the geometry, because I think it's interesting that the Walmart bikes in recent years have been offering a more progressive geometry in their starter bikes than a lot of the bigger bike companies or mountain bike companies. For instance, I had a 2016 Trek Remedy with a 68-degree head tube angle, and then I had a 2020 Schwinn Axum from Walmart that had standard geometry for the day. It had a 65-degree head tube angle. So, it's interesting that I think Walmart brands are listening to that type of feedback, and they have people who apparently understand mountain bikes actually making their mountain bikes. But okay, enough rambling. I need to actually get to your geometry here. The Ozark Trail FS2 Slalom in 2025 on the medium has a 450 millimeter reach, 614 millimeter stack, and then a 65-degree head tube angle, 69-degree seat tube angle, but that is not the effective seat tube angle. It's probably steeper. And then 1,211 millimeter wheelbase, 29er wheels, and then did we say chainstay? I do think... Yeah, we don't have the chainstay length on here, so I wish that was there. It'd be interesting to see that as well. But so that's pretty much it. We have the components, not great, but upgradable. It's pretty easy to switch from mechanical disc brakes to hydraulic. As mentioned, you can replace the wheels. You don't have to have some sort of through axle conversion for the rear. You could replace the fork pretty easily because it is a tapered head tube. And then you also do have a through axle on the front. So basically your options are wide open as far as what forks you want to put on there. And then let's see, the only thing I would say is annoying from upgrade perspective is that it is internally routed with the cable routing. So it would be harder to replace your drivetrain or your rear brake on that. But $498, you can't go super wrong with $498. Yeah, at least worth trying. And really, if you're if you're thinking about getting into mountain biking, I think it's interesting, to discuss if you're just looking to get into the sport. Your idea of a budget mountain bike is very different from someone who's been mountain biking for 10, 15 years. All right, next up we have another new bike intro, but a very, very different one. It's the Pivot Trailcat SL and Pivot Trailcat SL and LT, two different bikes, but they each are kind of marketed as two different bikes themselves because they have adjustable geometry. So let's get into the details. First, the Trailcat SL, 120 millimeter travel, and then a 140 millimeter fork. Obviously, different forks on different builds. Carbon frame, 29ers or mixed wheels, DW link suspension. We have a 65.8 degree or 66.3 degree head tube angle because that's adjustable geometry. 76 degree or 76.4 degrees seat tube angle. 431 millimeter chain stays on the medium. Pretty short and kind of playful there. This is a trail bike. And then sizes offered: extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. Lifetime frame warranty. And then the weight on the medium XTR build is 27.75 pounds. Pretty light. Pricing ranges from $5,999 all the way up to $13,099, which you could buy. What are the numbers on that? How many? $500, $13K. You could buy about 26 of the Ozark Trail bikes for the top end build of the Pivot Trailcat SL. All right, let's move on. The Trailcat LT has a 135 millimeter travel shock, 150 millimeter travel fork, carbon frame, 29er or mixed, DW link suspension, 65.3 or 65.6 head tube angle, 75.6 or 76 seat tube angle, 431 millimeter chain stays as well. Same sizes: extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. Also, lifetime frame warranty. And then the weight on the medium Team XTR build is 28.75 pounds. Pricing is $6,199 to $13,299. Great videos from Pivot of the husband and wife team, Jill Kittner and Bryn Atkinson, riding, so check those out. And then there also is a very in-depth review on Pink Bike, so you can check that out as well, and by Awesome MTB, Mo and Hannah, if you guys are familiar with them. They did a write-up and a YouTube review, so check both of those out as well. The next thing I want to jump onto is Redbull Hardline just finished up. Jackson Goldstone came back and won in his return. Edged out Asa Vermette, who came in at second place. And then Troy Brosnan rounded out the top three. Interesting controversy was there's an inside line that Jackson found that Asa did not ride, but apparently I think it was Troy. There was some controversy that Troy had given the line to Jackson, but turns out Jackson just saw the line on on a video replay and then chose to take it in his run. But pretty crazy that he saw a line and then decided to change up his line on his race run to take a new line there. It's pretty crazy to make that kind of adjustment on your race run. Asa did get squirrely off a drop earlier, so he probably could have won without that, without even taking that extra line. But interesting. But the main thing I wanted to talk about with Hardline, and what it brings up is I don't know how many people actually watch downhill mountain bike races. I don't know very many people who follow the World Cup. My main association with it is I listen to Pink Bike Pod, and they often talk about the results. But I don't follow super closely. I will watch Hardline. I watch Rampage. I don't watch the Crankworks slopestyle at events near as close as I used to 3 to 4 years ago. It was super, super interesting when it was Brandon Semenuk and Reeder going back and forth, and then you had Nikolai Rogatkin coming in the middle of all that, and it was definitely more interesting. I found it less interesting lately with Emil winning so much, but then I'm a huge David Godziak fan, and I always think the fast and loose way he rides makes me wish he would win more. But the technicality and the number of tricks and the variability that Emil puts in is obviously tailored towards the judges, but that brings up a whole nother can of worms with Rampage. Rampage judging kind of pissed off a lot of people this year, and kind of rightfully so. I feel like the spirit of Rampage is those raw lines and rugged faces and and all of that, as opposed to it becoming a trick event. And some of the, not necessarily the line, I'd say, lines, I don't know what you say, some of the routes or lines that were built in the last few years are becoming more and more and more manicured. And it was another case where I'm a Godziak fan, but the other Godziak this time, the way that they're both willing to not necessarily put it all on the line, but be like just on the edge of control, is far more entertaining to watch to me than a super manicured run with more, we'll say, more tricks thrown in. So more bar spins, tail whips, and things like that. So it's kind of an amplitude versus volume discussion. But then also Brendog's line is just way more fun to watch. Like I think they need to encourage more diversity within their judging, and then it would be more interesting. But circling back again, I don't know how many people watch downhill or cross country races across the world. I feel like more people in Europe and abroad do than in the US, but I'm super curious about it just to understand what people think. And like, brands put a lot of money into sponsoring their race teams, and how much are they actually getting out of that? I'm curious to see what people think about that. Okay, we're gonna move on to my next topic here, which is, what the heck is a budget mountain bike? And I think there are two different things. There's a budget mountain bike for your rider who's been riding for more than 3 years, and then there's a very different budget mountain bike for someone who's just getting into the sport. Mountain biking is great in the fact that once you have your bike, unless you're going to lift assist, you don't have to pay every single time you go, like golfing or skiing. However, the barrier cost to entry is very high. I used to work in a ski shop, and you could sell someone a budget set of really nice skis for $400, $500. But now with mountain biking, you don't really have that. If you want to buy a budget mountain bike, like I said, if you want to buy a budget mountain bike, your options are pretty limited. And once you get below a certain price point, we'll say $1,100, you start to lose a lot of features that I think are really important for a first bike. I think a first bike should be able to take you through that initial progression from not being able to ride on trails at all to being able to ride at a stage where you probably need a dropper post and you probably need hydraulic disc brakes. So green up to blue trails probably. But then the other key piece of a budget bike or an entry level bike specifically is that it must be upgradable. Of course, you could just sell the bike, but I think my dream entry to mountain biking for someone is to have a bike that they get to do all the basic work on and it's not too difficult. So like my dream budget mountain bike would have modern geometry, a 66-ish degree head tube angle, 76 degree seat tube angle, standard chainstay of like 435 to 440 millimeters, all the size offerings. So you can get the right size and you're not, round hole, square peg, round hole, and you don't have quite a perfect fit. But then you need to have through axles. You don't necessarily need an air fork, but I would say we're saying my dream mountain bike build should have an air fork, should have a dropper post, should have hydraulic disc brakes, and it should have tubeless ready tires, and it should be $800 to $900. So you could have the option, of course, you could buy a $500 bike, but you're going to have to upgrade things right away, and they might not be upgradable. Or you can buy this $900 bike that has everything you need, and you can probably ride it for 2 to 3 years, and it's upgradable once you need to upgrade. So if you want to have more, it'd be a hardtail, of course, from what I'm saying, but it should have a dropper post. I don't know if I said that. So you'd have the option then to upgrade the bike when you need to, or to sell that bike and buy a new bike if you decide you need a full suspension. But yeah, there's not a lot on the market within that, but I think it's totally possible to make that bike price-wise. I understand that brands are working on budgets and that's kind of difficult. But they have a few where it's $800, but all of a sudden you've moved it to full-on cross-country geometry, and it's a 68, 69 degree head tube angle, and it just doesn't make sense. And you also have quick release on there, and it's like $800. You could make this with through axle. I know it's possible. So it's frustrating to me. There aren't very many bikes out there like that, and there are a few though that are close, and let's see, I have a few. One that's really interesting, and again, it's a little more boutique, so it's not quite my dream. The only thing off is the price. The Newhouse Hummingbird, it's $1,199, but you have all size options. It's, I believe, steel hardtail, but you have a Marzocchi fork on there. You have a dropper post. You have, let's see, 74.5 degree seat tube angle, 66 degree head tube angle, 120 millimeters of travel, SRAM GX, and then you have hydraulic disc brakes. Like this is an awesome starter bike, but also just, I think it'd just be a fun hardtail for anyone to ride. But this is the dream starter mountain bike, in my opinion. This is exactly what you should be looking for. All external cable routing, perfect. It's perfect. It's a little more expensive than the ideal range that I'm trying to build, what I would be trying to target. But it's that little bit higher end option if someone needed that or wanted to go, a little bit nicer. Next was the Trek Roscoe 7. You can get it at $1,099 right now, but it's $1,899 normally. So that like kind of just boots it totally out of my dream entry level bike. I think it's a great entry level bike, but I think it's too expensive. And I don't know how they could necessarily cut down on cost, but it seems like looking at the new house, it really could be 1,100. So let's look. 140 millimeter travel. We have a dropper post on there. It's a RockShox fork, but let me see if I can find it. Specs, yeah. We've got a RockShox Recon Silver RL air fork. Through axles, dropper post, all the sizes, tons of color options. But $1,900? I mean, if Newhouse can put together 1,199 with a Marzocchi fork, like, come on, Trek, I think you can do it. All right, and then next, I just saw this pop up for me. It's a Norco Charger 2. Yeah, this is really cool. I think this was just released. Norco Charger 2 at Jensen USA, and it's $999. I'm just looking at this, but it has progressive geometry from what I can tell. You can have 2 water bottle cages and an accessory mount. Looks like an X-Fusion. Yeah, X-Fusion RC32 Air fork up front. 130 millimeters travel, boost spacing, through axle. Shimano Dior SL 12-speed drivetrain. Let's see, Tektro HD M275 hydraulic brakes. 160 millimeter rotors. Yeah, this is a really good setup. Let's check the numbers. 450 millimeter reach, 75 degree seat tube angle, and a 65 degree head tube angle. And then let's see if we can see the chainstay. 430 millimeter chainstay. So this is really, really close to my dream build budget mountain bike. If it was $99 cheaper, it'd basically hit everything. I feel like maybe they could put a better fork on there, but it's an air fork. Like, I don't know. I can't complain much about that. That's really cool. Just medium and large available, at least right now. I don't know. I thought this launched recently, but maybe they sold out quickly. Maxxis Forecasters on there. It does seem like that's probably tubeless ready, but I'm not totally sure about that. But yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, there are tons of options when you get into the $2,000 to $6,000 full suspension. So I feel like the mountain bike industry is selling to its existing customers, and bikes are getting better and better, and geometry has gotten better and better, and it's hit a point where geometry is not really changing. So they're counting on like people who have bikes already to buy more bikes, and I don't think that's a sustainable strategy. We had a lot of people get into the bike industry, or not into the industry, but into the mountain biking market in 2020. And that was because of COVID, right? And the situation surrounding the world. And like right now, why do you think people are going to get into mountain biking? And the barrier to entry is the price, absolutely, because they could pick up a different hobby. Like, people could go run. They just need a $90 pair of shoes, And I think the other thing interesting about the industry to me is on the topic of racing is, who are we really marketing to, or who are they marketing to? It's a lot of the marketing around mountain biking is Like, how fast can you go? How fast can you go? And what gnarly stuff can you ride? And a lot of people get into mountain biking just because they want to be outside. So the gravel section of bikes or of cyclery is doing a lot better right now than mountain bikes. And I feel like they're marketing towards like, hey, you just want to get outside and explore and have time with your friends. And mountain biking is missing that with their marketing really poorly. It's, what interesting new, tech do we have on this bike? And that stuff's awesome. But it's not getting more people into the industry. And maybe it's making people with a lot of extra money buy more bikes who already have bikes. But it just doesn't seem sustainable to me, given the plateauing of geometry. The little things like my geometry on my bike I bought in 2021 is the same as bikes being released now. Within the same price point, they have the same SRAM NX drivetrain, just newer, and there's not much change on that. But then maybe I have internal frame storage. Like, I'm not going to buy a new bike just because of that. Unless I have a ton of extra money, and not everyone does, especially in this economy. So, like, what are you marketing to? Bring people into the industry. So what is a budget mountain bike? I think is a super important question for them to be asking, but I don't know who's asking it besides Walmart, which is crazy to me, because who should know about mountain biking? It should be the mountain bike companies, not Ozark Trail and Walmart, which it's curious to me that that's not more of a focus for brands, like building the best entry-level bike. And it's not just that they should put all their focus into that, but why are there only a handful of bikes if there are more than a handful of brands? I think everyone should have a 500, maybe I'm being crazy with that, but $500 to $1,000 entry-level bike that's offered that has modern geometry for basically a trail bike, but trail bike, hardtail, modern geometry, under $1,000. Every brand should have one of those. And I think you'd bring more people into the industry. And then everyone in the industry, everyone who mountain bikes, just be welcoming to people who are out on the trails with cheap bikes. Recognize them as maybe someone who's new and offer to ride down the trail with them. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk here. Let's keep going. The other interesting thing was the Intense 951 Carbon. Yeah, so the Intense 951 Carbon it's had quite the journey in its price. It's under $2,000 now for a carbon trail bike. And the specs on this are kind of insane for the price. It started out at $4,199 from Intense. And the $1,999 is X demo pricing. So I want to make sure that's clear to everyone. You can buy open box, $2,299, X demo for $1,999 or $1,899. And then, holy smokes, there's an Intense e-mountain bike with a coil shock and DVO suspension for $2,800. What the jeez? All right, well, whatever. There are some crazy deals from bikes online. But the story behind this, Intense was selling them. They had a deal with Costco to sell them at Costco, which, again, I feel like pretty out of touch to drop a almost $4,000. They're selling it for $3,800 carbon trail bike in Costco. People aren't going there to buy a trail bike, a carbon trail bike. They're not going there to buy a carbon trail bike. They might buy a $600 entry-level mountain bike there on a whim, as they're also buying their $400 sup boards and hobby stuff that they're just getting into. But that's terrible placement, in my opinion, by Intense. But now you can buy it for half the price So $19.99, you can get X Demo Carbon that was originally priced at $4,200. Small, medium, large, extra large, 150 fork, 140 millimeter rear travel. We've got a Fox Rhythm 36 float, and then with the grip damper, 150 millimeter travel, and then Fox Float X2 in the back. SRAM NX Eagle 12-speed drivetrain. Goodness gracious. This is a ridiculous deal. And then I think we should talk about the geometry just so you know, but we'll do it real quick. All right, Geo, we have 65 and a I always do that. 65.5 degree head tube angle, medium 454 millimeter reach, 619 stack, 77 degree effective seat tube angle, 1209 wheelbase, a 442 millimeter chainstay length, and why is the head tube angles listed twice? Oh, no, because there's a flip chip. Duh. So it can be adjusted down to 65.2 degree head tube angle. But ridiculous. So Intense had these at Costco, didn't sell. Bikes Online, I believe, bought them. Well, I know it's Bikes Online, but I believe they bought them from Costco, and now they're selling out the stock. So they must have got a screaming deal to buy these up from Costco and sell them on closeout. But now you could get a ridiculous deal for a carbon trail bike. Yeah, crazy. But they must have bought up more from Intense because we have different frame colors, but there's a gravel carbon bike, Intense 951 for $1,800. There's a few different colors, and then there's Intense 951 mountain bike, originally retailed for $6,000 for $28.99 currently. Bunch of different colors and finishes, but 951 series trail carbon. There's a bunch of different colors and finishes of that same bike there right now. All right, that is that for the quote-unquote deal section, but more I wanted to talk about just the prices of bikes and things and how out of touch the market is. Like, I think Intense thought they were offering a good deal because it's a $4,000 carbon bike. Like, objectively, it's a good deal. But that doesn't mean that someone who's trying to get into mountain biking thinks it's a good deal, you know? And you put it in Costco, it's not where people go to buy a mountain bike, so it's a spur-of-the-moment purchase, so it's an entry-level mountain biker. Like, who buys a carbon full suspension as their first mountain bike, like on a whim? For $4,000 when they're walking through Costco. It does not make sense to me. That does not make sense. It makes perfect sense that they didn't sell, and now they're here at Bikes Online, but it is what it is. Last thing, did you know that Mike Levy is still around? Killed by Death has not yet been killed by death. He's podcasting. I don't know if his official role is like podcast host for Velo, but he is podcasting with the Velo podcast, which is part of Outside Online, so he's kind of still within that umbrella that Pink Bike was under, but talking more about gravel bikes currently. So if you want to go listen to Mike Levy just for old time's sake, you can hear him listen. You can hear him talk about gravel bikes. Unfortunately, he has not talked about aliens there. That's what I want to hear Mike Levy talk over. But I guess we'll have to wait for that. And if you want Mike Levy to get on this podcast to talk about aliens and mountain bikes again, let him know. Go tag him. Go tag him down here. I don't think you can actually even tag people, but if you want Mike Levy to get on this podcast, go leave a comment below, and I'll send all the comments to him somehow. and we'll get them on. But yeah, I think that's all I have for today. And if you listened this far, thank you so much. You are an absolute all-star. And if you listen this far and haven't subscribed, you must have forgotten to stop this from playing. But I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of it, even if you just left your browser open and aren't even paying attention anymore. But if you did listen this far and you're not subscribed, I think you should hit the button. I think you should like it. And if you have any negative feedback, I think you should just exit out and not listen to the podcast anymore. We don't listen to negative feedback here. But yeah, that is it, guys. I will catch you on the next one. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate anyone who listened to this anywhere. And I hope you have an awesome week. I hope you find some fresh dirt on the trails, and I will catch you out there. Have a wonderful day.